Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Beyond the Bank, a podcast that we are putting together to talk about different things to help start or advance your journey towards generational wealth. I am joined by some amazing people. We're going to go around and introduce ourselves. Let's start with Kylan today. Kylan, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and why you're here.
My name is Kylan Flynn. I help men with boundary setting and taking actions so that they can pursue their dreams. And I'm here because I've had people step up in my own life that have helped me with this subject. And that's what we do as coaches is we help people and pass things on.
Love it. Let's go over to Sahadia.
Hello, my name is Sahadia Etienne. I am a strategic communications specialist by trade. I am also a results coach working primarily with women entrepreneurs, women who've had that long last dream that they know it's in their heart, they know it's there for them to do, but they don't know where to start and how to get there. So I am so happy to be here with you, with such great folks on the panel today, and to be able to share our own experience and thoughts with you.
All right, Adriana.
Hi, guys. My name is Adriana Backus. I am a transformational relationship coach, and I empower women to have a deep relationship with themselves, which paves way for a more fulfilling life and a more fulfilling love life as well. And I'm here because I obviously value relationships and communication, and I feel like that is one of the best ways to get through life. So I want to help educate other people and bring awareness as to ways to empower themselves to get the most out of to get the most out of life that they are wanting to get.
Love it. And I am Maggie Timmons. I am the founder of Running Fox Living Food. I coach diabetics who are struggling with controlling their blood sugars to find more of that control through their diet without getting stuck in like bland, boring diets. In addition to that, we talk about things like how to get more time and have the confidence in the choices that we're making around our food. And I'm here because generational wealth to me is about going beyond the bank and building up a life that we can live and enjoy over the long term with our families. And with that, we're going to talk today about how we get those conversations started, how we can really begin the transformation. And for those of you guys who are just joining us today, this is the third episode in. We started out talking about what kind of values and beliefs, because these are part of generational wealth as well, that are foundational for building generational wealth on. And then last month, we shared a couple of practical, tactical tips to help people get started. And when you kind of have an idea of where to get started, like the next step is if we are doing something on our own, if we are building wealth and it's just ours, that's just building wealth. That's not building generational wealth. Generational wealth happens when we can start transferring that wealth to the people around us, our own blood families, our chosen families, our communities, whatever that looks like for you. And so today I want to dive into talking about how we can start those conversations, continue those conversations, or get them to stick. Because I have heard stories, right? Like I've never known anyone personally where someone has inherited like large sums of money and in one generation they've wasted it, spent it. Everything that may have been built up then disappears. So how do we when we are looking at wanting to build generational wealth, start generational wealth, set it up so that it is transferable. And that's really what the conversation today is going to be about. So, who's jumping in first? Adriana, you've got a big smile. Let's go. Bring it,
I
girl.
feel like I was gonna get picked. That's why I was like, I have the spidey senses tingling right now. I think it hmm. Everything starts at home. I think everyone's heard that for years, and I agree with that. Oddly enough, actually my pastor this last week at church mentioned how they have like a code with their kids. They're like, they use their last name and like, what's the code of the house? And it was, I think, being like loving, caring, and it basically was things of how to have like create a good character and create like good values and instill that within the kids. And I really value that. I don't have kids yet. I want 3. But I've always been mindful, and I've always been in the sphere with kids and educating them and working with volunteering with them. So mentoring, guiding. I've been an advisor for university. So I've always been around sculpting people like that and instilling values and integrity and enhancing character. And I've always felt like that was something very important. No matter what age, you can refine, you can add, you can subtract, you can do what you need to get the qualities you're really wanting to create a life you desire. Obviously, it's easier if you start from like a kid's age. And I really liked the code of conduct my pastor spoke about, because to me, that was just a fun way of showing what your family really represents, what you value, and like really what you're instilling in the next generation, and knowing that they can really feel. Yes.
I would say, let me ask you a question on that, because I think it's fantastic that you are here talking about this and you haven't started your family yet.
Mhm.
So you have a blank slate to be able to open up and start this. Like, what are your intentions, your plans? Everything goes perfectly, like, to build this into your family as it develops, as it grows, as it starts.
My partner, I don't have one yet. in this point station, I'm choosing to be single at this point in time because I'm building my business. So I'm intentionally single at this current moment. I was in a 10-year relationship, but at this point, it's knowing that when I have a partner, our values are aligned, are what we're wanting in life, compatibility. That's also something I do coach on, is making sure, because I don't feel like there's a right partner, like a perfect person, because everyone's people, everyone's imperfect, everyone has their stuff. It's who are you the most compatible with, values that align the most. What's your vision? Do you have the same, like, eating healthy? Like, are you like politically, religion, like communication styles? Like, what do you value? And does the other person value that? And I don't believe the significant other has to be your like mirrored exact self, like, because that's also not healthy. That's bland. You do need polarity. I do believe though, because if you do have differences, you can expand, but the really important things that you value have to be in alignment to create a proper household that is stable, has the stability you would need, and has the aligned vision to create a strong foundation for your family and where you guys are going. Does that answer your question, Maggie?
I believe so. And I want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly. So would it be fair to say that when you're looking at this, for you, starting is really about, as you are developing that personal relationship with a significant other, to make sure that you are in alignment with those long-term goals and perspectives, and like that is a conversation that you've had that has happened?
Correct. That's how I had a really healthy long-term relationship. And things do adapt throughout time, but it's making sure like certain things that A, you do need to have conversations throughout the entire time, and B, people do change, but really like certain values I feel like don't really adjust. And if they do, that is a conversation piece. But as long as I feel like your long-term goals of like, for example, like if I want to live nomadically the rest of my life, the partner should want to do that too, versus I want to settle and like have like the white picket fence. You know what I mean? Like there's different things where you're like, well, that doesn't make a lick of sense. Like
It's true.
yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So how about you, Sahadia? I know you are closer to me because you still have a couple of kids at home that you are raising and helping grow up. Where do you feel like you are in the conversation about generational wealth? And I didn't ask this, so let me throw this in, but like, do you feel like it was something that you are inheriting that was talked about with you?
Is a question from you?
For everyone as we go through, so you too.
Okay. Okay. You know what? Definitely generational wealth. It was not a conversation that we're having at home. Funny enough, people who are close to me, to my family, they know the story. Funny enough, I had a mother because she passed away during the earthquake in Haiti a few years back. I had a mother who was a savvy businesswoman. She was not born in money, but she made her money. And one thing I did not understand is that she kept telling me, Saharia, I want to get you involved. I want to teach you what I know. She wanted to pass that along. But I did not realize the importance. To me, the money's there. What do I need to worry about? It'll be there for me to use and my kids to use. And then sadly enough, she passed away in the earthquake. I had no information about her businesses, who she was dealing with, who owns, who had the keys to this and that. And we lost 60%, over 60% of her legacy because I, as her eldest kid, never chose to be involved and to learn from her. So with that experience, I vowed that this would not happen between me and my kids, that I need to teach them. I need to let them, and they know the story. That story I'm telling you, they know it. Because I had to share that personal story to tell them this is why it's important. So although, like I said, generational wealth was not being spoken at home, it's because it was my fault. I did not get the importance of it. So now I do have those conversations with the boys. They're 17 and 19. To them, it's, Mom, we have time. Okay. But you don't know how much time you have, right? And one thing I think it's very important when we're having those conversations is to make sure that the why is clear. When I'm talking to the boys about it, or if I'm talking to anybody about it, it's why do I want to create that generational wealth? Because when I talk about the why, I'm getting the people I'm talking to, whether it's my spouse or my kids, the opportunity to get into that conversation with me to let me know if they agree with my goals and objectives, if they agree with my vision. And also that will give us the opportunity to understand what each other's relationship to money is, because that can be a very big pinpoint in when coming together with people with different relationships to money, people with different experiences to money, to come together towards a common goal in generational wealth. So that's my bit to share on that.
Thank you, because that was an amazing story. I appreciate you saying that. How about you, Kylie?
I almost just had a stroke because I heard a mistake that I personally made in there, and that's I have a lot of time, right?
Mhm.
This is the season of my life where I can do whatever I want and spend whatever I want. And I've had family and close friends go down both roads, right? I've got some people that are have been very successful financially, and other people that have not. And this goes back into our earlier conversation about values and belief systems, and why that's so important in this. So if I was going to zoom out to 10,000 feet, I think I'd probably be in generation 2 out of 3. So if the first generation works hard, the family's provided for, but there's not a lot of extras, there's not a lot of new things, then the next generation comes around and maybe they have the opportunity to get educated, or they're more successful in business and they have more money. So they've got the elevated resources. They're more comfortable. Perhaps there's a little bit more opportunity than even they had, but that understanding of money is still not there. That understanding of starting earlier, of being consistent, isn't quite there. So yeah, I heard when Adriana was talking a lot about the value systems that we talked about originally, and why these things are important. And yeah, hey, I want you to enjoy your life, but I want you to enjoy all your life and not just have a blast for 4 years and then struggle for the rest of it. That's a very poor return on your investment. So that's where I think this really comes in, because even when we've had people in our lives, even if we've had some success in our own lives, we may not understand as much as we could about how money works, and the systems and the real power behind how we can use some of the tactics that we talked about last time as well. So stop me when this sounds familiar. I'm like, what would I have needed 10 or 15 years ago?
Right?
You know, if I had known XYZ 10 or 15 years ago, and at this point, this is what we do, right? We help people. So it's like, okay, I love the phrase "a rising tide lifts all boats." So somebody else that is watching this, that starts implementing systems of their own, that comes up with that family code, that starts living by a different value system, you know, that's I think there's real beauty in that, right? Okay, well, what are some of the poor habits that my parents had, or that I personally have, that I can now break?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, my family and my grandfather and my grandfather's grandfather were poor. Okay, well, guess what? I'm going to break that generational curse. We're going to learn about money. And even if I don't know about money, you're going to learn about money.
I love what you're talking about there. And I apologize for cutting you off, but I want to highlight this point that you're talking about, like my grandfather and all of these things. Because as I was listening to Sahadia's story, I'm like, Sahadia's story sounds very similar to my grandfather's story, because I actually feel like that's where it started. So with my grandfather, and I never had the opportunity to meet him, but his wife died in childbirth with my dad, and my dad is an only child. And so they had some money, some resources. My grandfather was a savvy businessman. Having lost his wife very early on, I think really affected how he shared things. And my dad was really open and shared the story about his dad, his childhood, how he grew up. And that made a huge impact on my dad and how he raised my sister and I. And that story, telling that story, was really impactful. It made a lot of sense. Like it's setting in for your boys the way it set in for my father. And I do feel like I get to benefit from generational wealth having been started. And one of the things that I see in my story is that as I was growing up, my dad would pull me aside and he would point out, like Kylan was talking about, other people's situations. Look at that family. What do you see? What is it that they are doing? And pointing out the differences, and then talking about how this habit, whatever it is that you are looking at, can be such a huge difference and a game changer, and comparing it and allowing us to learn from other people's lives, like Kylan was talking about. I wanted to specifically highlight that, and I appreciate you giving me the space to do that, Kylan. Please finish up your story and your thoughts. I apologize.
You ladies hit me right in the feels with this one. Wow. No, but we talked about why a value system is important, and I think when we're dealing with people, especially people we care about or people we're trying to help, part of that is checking behaviors that aren't going to serve them or help them to serve other people, and encouraging that change in language. And I usually start there. Like I said, I heard you got to change your mindset, you got to look at things differently, and wanted to punch people in the face repeatedly.
No violence.
However, until you actually experience it, right? But it's the little things that you do. We can't afford this versus, okay, how can you afford this? What can you go do? Have you thought about mowing lawns? Have you thought about one right out of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, renting out comic books, rather than a final answer to some of these things that's going to build a belief system or create that scarcity mindset. And then I know I've had a tendency in the past to overcorrect on things like that. Oh, I didn't have this before, so now I'm going to have a lot of it, which for what? Start building up in the people who we're trying to serve, the concepts of being really curious and having big ideas and leaning into fear and falling flat on your face, and how that's not the end.
So can I ask a question? Because I love everything that you're saying. And you said something earlier about how when people would say, change your mindset, change your life, like that would infuriate you. And I think that's part of what this conversation is about today, is that you can throw out these phrases and different things. And a lot of times, especially if it is a catchy phrase that we hear all of the time, it can be easily dismissed, discounted. How do you take these concepts that we're talking about, we agree upon, we're going to dive into all through this year, and really share them, tell them in such a way as people don't want to dismiss it, that it makes people stop and be like, that does hit my feels. I feel like, it means something to me, because that's really when this conversation becomes real, is when it starts to mean something to someone else. That's when we transfer this knowledge, this tide, because that's what we want to do, build a tide to lift all boats. But we're taking on the responsibility to create the wave. How do you format that?
For me personally, and I'm sure that this is going to be something that a few of us have heard already, or if we've got the psych background, this is going to make sense. I may at times be a little thick-headed, just maybe. So some of this is just stuff that I've been beaten over the head with, right? I've heard it. I've heard it 5, 7, 9, 10,000 times. Right. And I joke with my father about this now too. It's like, hey, I know you don't think I listen. And sometimes I don't, However,
That
I
particular
didn't
time,
really
I
have
wasn't.
I didn't really have a choice. So, some of this actually penetrated, and this is now part of my value system. These are the principles that I live by now, and they've served me well.
So would
Um,
you say that you are not upset with your dad for the repetition for these things going in?
No, no, and it's the same thing, and I don't have kids of my own at this time, but it's the same thing when I'm trying to help younger people. I mean, when I see younger people win, especially, it's just like, yes, they're gonna skip so much misery, and that's gonna put them so much further ahead to help other people. Like, that's just one of those things that I love. But and sometimes you just want to shake them and be like, yeah, okay, we're older for a reason. We survived a lot of dumb stuff, you know.
So I want to make sure that we get to like a couple of different things. So Sahadia, Adriana, what if you have what is your suggestion, your call out? If you don't have one, I'll go. But
I don't have one yet. Maybe you go and I'll see.
You go ahead, Maggie.
all right. So
It's all on you now.
I love the repetition. I 100% agree that being consistent in your message, saying it repetitively, that helps it get in. Saying it repetitively in different formats is really where I'm going. Being able to turn it into not just one story, but multiple stories. And I think that's one of the key things. If you can tell it in a story, like Sahadia was telling her story about her mom and how that experience made her feel, and that drive and desire to then share that with her boys. My story about my great grandfather, it's a completely different perspective, but in a lot of ways, it's kind of the same story. It is a story about going through that personal level of loss where there was some inheritance that started to be built up, and yet it was lost or damaged severely. And like this desire to rebuild it and not want it to be lost again. Same story, different perspective, but because it's in a story, we relate things. Stories are the original way that we communicated and shared information. Language was built on telling stories to share knowledge. Verbal, there's words and I can't remember them right now, but it's like there are cultures who never developed a written language and everything was transferred through stories. And there's a tribe in Africa, I forget the name of it. I was watching a documentary going to bed the other night. I think it was Australia actually. And like they've never had a written language, and yet in their stories, cave art, paintings, they literally can date things back to like world events, volcanoes exploding, and be able to document that accurately, and people can go in and tell the story because they've heard it from their ancestors. So that's my thing. Don't make it a cliche saying. Take a cliche saying and make it into a story. Why is this important? And it doesn't have to be our own. It just has to be a story, because that's how we'll remember it. That's how we'll carry it, and be able to implement that. Because when you're telling a story and you can get really vivid into it, people can see themselves in it. They can start to care about it. When you start to see it in your own mind, I literally heard the stress in Sahadia's voice as she was talking about it, because that was so much more recent for her than it was for me. That emotion was completely different in my voice. And that's the difference between the stories. But put it in a story. That's my tip. So we've been at this for 25 minutes or so. Do you guys have any last thoughts, last suggestions on how to make it generational, pass down, transfer wealth from our own personal efforts into our families and our communities?
Something I can quickly add something. As you were just talking, Maggie, it is something I think that we will all agree on for sure. Like you said, the storytelling will always go further than, using a typical cliche. But something that we need to make sure that we also add to that when we're telling the story is that person we're telling the story to, whoever it is, they have their own desires. When they're thinking about their future, we all have dreams. We have to speak it in a language that resonates to them, to their own hearts and desires. My two boys, I know they have complete different objectives, different dreams. When I'm talking to them about those principles, those tactical practices about generational wealth, I don't use a theory. I use stories based on, for example, my youngest, it's soccer. He's a soccer player. Trust me, that's where the conversation goes. And my other son he's an artist. He's into music. I use music. I use stories about people in his space. I make it clear what's in it for them. So that's the one thing also to keep in mind.
Love that.
I love what Hadia said, because I was going to say it from a different way of basically knowing your audience. And she touched on that, because as someone that studies psychology and communications, and I've been a manager, I would really try and figure out my team and all the people I was working with, because the more I understood them, the better I could communicate and convey for them to actually be able to be receptive to what I was saying. And I was able to speak in their language, what they needed to understand. So same thing, different way of saying it.
Same thing, different ways.
Yep.
What a great example. I love that. Kylan, parting words?
I would say encourage curiosity, and we talked previously about failing in safety. So encourage curiosity. Don't worry about repeating yourself, but they might go out and listen to somebody else or read something else. And it's just phrased a different way, and it finally clicks, because I've had that happen too. And gamify things and make sure that there are consequences in those, so that they can have an experience like, oh, okay, here's X amount of money, you can do what you want with it, and they'll blow it, and another opportunity presents itself, and they'll be like, well, what happened to the money that you had? Because sometimes we gotta feel the bruise on our head after we've bashed it against the wall a couple of times, and for that message to start.
And we're going to get into, I definitely want to get into gamifying, how to make things different, interesting, unique, motivating. And we'll dive into that in one of our future episodes. So make sure that you guys are coming back, checking out those future episodes as we are continuing to grow, develop more messages, share more of these tips, dive into these different topics for all of us to be able to grow, develop, transfer that wealth personally, so that we have enough to share with the people that are around us, because that's what generational wealth is all about. So thank you guys for being here, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.